Okay, great. So welcome everybody to our first pure online edition of Toronto Mobile.net developers. Today we've got Nico presenting Xamarin security recipes. Was that the title of it, Nico, or was it something a little more clever? Perfect.
Yeah, I don't know, that was it. Yeah.
I'm personally looking forward to this a lot because I think it's one of those things that tends to be a bit of an afterthought when building mobile apps, and it should be right up front and center. So really looking forward to this. Yeah, this is our first time on pure Zoom. I would have liked to had this multicast. I was just telling Nico about some of the audio issues I ran into. So we'll get that sorted out for next time, but for this time, it's just going to be Zoom only, and we'll put the recording up afterwards. Just a few quick notes before I turn things over to Nico. I just want to plug a few upcoming events. So Melbourne Blazer and Xamarin Meetup, these guys always have great topics, and they're going to touch on some of the 4.7 and 4.8 updates for Xamarin Forms coming down the line. So some of the UI enhancements that are coming through that. I believe they put their recordings up too. You have to watch their time zone. I believe this is 4:30 in the morning Eastern time. Nico, I don't know. I think you're in Europe, right? So it probably makes it easy for you to hit that. But
I'm actually in Argentina, so
you're in
we're almost in the
Argentina.
same time zone. Yes.
Oh, okay. So yeah, you'll have the same challenges as me trying to make the Melbourne
Yes.
meetups. But I think they're pretty good at posting them online, so you can check them out after the fact on their YouTube. So that's a good one to just keep up to date with the new changes coming down the line. Also at the Belgian Mobile.net developers group has a session on Prism. I'm a big Prism fan. I think everybody who's seen me present knows that. And then the mobile build tools that Dan Siegel put together are pretty handy as well. So that's a good one to look at and to tune into as well. That one's I think it's pretty manageable for people in North America. I think it's a midday session. Another one coming up. This one is through the Microsoft Reactor channels. So they've been advertising because they're up against the same challenges that we are. With COVID, the Reactor spaces are not operational, so they're doing all their streaming on Twitch. So this is a lunchtime session where they're going to talk about IoT Hub, so Azure IoT Hub and Xamarin. So that should be a great session. It's Swiki and Ben doing that, so that'll be a good session for everybody who's interested in both Xamarin and IoT. So that's coming up just on July 9th, so a little less than a month from now. And then last but not least, our July session is going to be Brandon Minnick. He's going to present some future of Xamarin points, so mostly with the focus on .NET MAUI. So another good one to keep your eye on to keep up to date with all the changes coming down the line. All right, so without further ado, Nico, I will make you the host.
All right.
And we can kick this off. All right.
Okay. I see I'm the host now. And I see we have some people in the waiting room, so I'll just admit them all.
Beautiful.
And share my screen. All right, so can I see it? Hope
yeah,
you
looks
can.
Good.
That's cool. All right, so yeah, hello everybody. Thanks a lot for having me today. I'm Nico. I live in Argentina, even though I work for Xablu. So Xablu is actually a remote first company. I spend part of my time there and part of my time here in Argentina. So yeah, I hope everyone's safe at home. As Dale was mentioning, might be better probably to just have on-site meetings, but on the other hand, of course, well, going virtual allows me to present this content to you, for example, so that's also nice. So let's just get started. Now, first, who is this guy? Well, just to also a little bit to say the kind of the expectations, you know, on what are we going to talk about. And let me see that I see we have more people in the waiting room. Where it is. So who is this guy again? Sorry. Yeah, I'm a mobile developer mostly, but I'm also, well, Xamarin specialist, an open source contributor. You might know my name or my nickname and Milcoff from probably something like MvvmCross or another bunch of libraries that they maintain or contribute to. And yeah, and I'm a security specialist, yeah, an enthusiast, I would say. And by that I mean that, yeah, I needed to implement quite a lot of security measures in mobile apps through my experience and through the projects that I worked on. But I am by no means a person that works full-time in security. So that's one of the points I want to make with this talk. You don't really need to be a security specialist to make an app secure. So it's actually up to following those practices and those kind of things, and then you should be in good hands. So yeah, just to make this more illustrated maybe, you don't really need to know how HTTPS works internally. You just need to know you need to use HTTPS. So that's what we will see through this talk in many, many topics. So mobile security. Well, one of the first things we'd find if you look for something like that in Google is that probably this, yeah, it's not too easy. There are many challenges and we'll see them all. So then why is it? Why is that? Well, first, as mobile developers, we had to, well, focus in many different platforms. We can, yeah, we're supposed to work on iOS apps, but also Android, and we should also support Windows, macOS, too many platforms that are usually fragmented, especially in Android, for example. So every platform, every SDK, every API level has its own challenges, its own rules, its own security measures that you need to be aware of, and things like that. And that's, of course, not to mention, well, the fact that if you're trying to make something secure, then that your solution is going to be as secure as the worst of your platforms. So generally, we will see that Android is a little bit more challenging than iOS. So if you make it 100% right in iOS and your app is super secure there, but you're also targeting Android, and well, and your Android app is compromised, well, bad news, because it's very likely that your iOS app is compromised as well. Just remember that with Xamarin, we're even sharing code, which means if somebody is able to reverse engineer your code on Android, well, they have at least, we could say, 50% of that code as well for iOS, because yeah, the business code, the business logic code is all shared. Then one important thing that's different from web is that we're just delivering and deploying our entire source code when we deploy apps to these stores. So an APK file is just a zip, for example, just a different format, just a different name, but in the end, users will get just, you know, the source code. You can try to obfuscate it, you can try to apply different things to that, but in the end, you're just delaying the attacker and you're not really able to hide your code entirely. So that's, yeah, something that we just need to be aware of. We cannot change much there. Then there's, of course, this is a game about the mouse and the cat. Security, good practices change over time. You need to be up to date all the time. And if you really need to go deep into this, then you are actually playing this game. It's just trying to be one step ahead. Now, the good news is that for the most cases, you can just stay away from this game. It's only if you like really need to go very deep and you're a banking app, for example, things like that, yeah, this becomes a thing. Then, of course, there are other factors, like we live in a real world, and this world has limited resources, so we have money, we have time, and we need to bring the most value. Um, so that's also accompanied, yeah, usually goes hand by hand with the fact we need to deliver. So we as developers, that's our job. There are tons of money being invested into software, and of course, there are expectations. Now, it's of course it's okay that it happens like that, but in the end, because security is not something that you can see in front of you, basically. So it's not something. It's always good. It's like nothing until something bad happens. Um, so then it's, yeah, typically the case that you just delay those security measures, those security good practice implementations, because you need to deliver features. And then last but not least, I would say that we need to look at ourselves also and realize that in many cases, we just prefer not to deal with the topic, I would even say. So nobody wants it. That's just because also we're human beings. But I think it's a reality that if you look at conferences, for example, you don't see many talks about security. So generally, for developers, it's like I think partially we think it's not our jobs. Well, of course it is. So I'm here to tell you it's not that easy, maybe. And yeah, so again, we don't need to be experts to get it right. So, okay, that everything sounds good. So how do we start? And well, there are many ways, of course. That question has many different answers. It really depends on what do you need to comply to first. And so if you're into healthcare, or if, yeah, what kind of regulations do you need to comply to? Generally speaking, and what we are going to look at is OWASP. So OWASP is a consortium, so it's a non-profit consortium. So it's built up from many different companies around the world and individuals that are just interested in the security. And yeah, it started out a few years ago already. It OWASP stands for Open Web Application Security Projects, and they have really a lot of different yeah, projects, I would say. And they have, I think, 3 are the most important ones for mobile. So let's go and check them out. The first one is the top 10. This list is a very short list, just 10 items, and they list whatever they think are the most, the top risks for our industry and things that we really need to look at from a security standing point, of course. So this list has been elaborated first in 2014, and this is the second version from 2016. And as you can see, that's already 4 years old, right? But the thing is, well, the landscape didn't change much in this time, in this period. So the challenges are still there. We didn't actually solve them in a way that we can just say this is not a risk anymore. Now, I won't really dive deep into all of them because we're going to focus on a different project from OWASP, but just to maybe, yeah, elaborate a bit. So we have, for example, the first one. So that's the top risk. That's like the thing you should care the most about. That's where things will go wrong for sure. And that's improper platform usage stands for not reading the manual accordingly, just that. So for example, iOS and Android, both platforms have security measures, have many different implementations to allow you to make an app secure. But then if you get that wrong, if you don't really pay attention to what you should do, for example, well, then that's how things go wrong. So for example, if you misuse the keychain on iOS, and if you store information in a way that you shouldn't, for example, well, that stands for improper platform usage. And then the last two, for example, reverse engineering, that's just basically, given some bytecode or given an APK or an iOS IPA, well, that's just extracting the source code and analyzing it from the deliverable. And the last one, extraneous functionality, that's super common because we are developers, so we are usually, the the people that are to, that cost it. And that's, for example, if you have some test code and you didn't remove that in your release version, well, that's going to be an extraneous functionality, and that's what the risk is talking about. But we said we won't really concentrate on this project. Let's look at the next one. So this is the MASVS. This is actually the one we will care the most about. So this is the mobile application security verification standard. So this is actually a standard that you can comply to, you can get certified, and there are 3 different levels, as we will see later. So I think it was created like something like also 4 years ago, if I'm correct, and it is available as a PDF, as a Git book. It's entirely open source, of course. It's available in different languages. It's just awesome. But it's of course pretty theoretical, I would say. So you don't really get an idea of how to do certain things by just reading OWASP MASVS. Now, what do you use then? Well, this guide goes together with the second one, and that's called MSTG. So that's the testing guide. Basically, this one will tell you how to test if that, well, if a point mentioned in the guide is actually applied, or it's also going to tell you how to do it if it's not there. Now, right now, I think OWASP is releasing an updated version for this guide, and I highly recommend it that you actually use it and go through it. I have the links open, I think. Dylan, thanks for sharing as well. So yeah, these are the repositories. Yeah, you can see that yourself. Links are on the chat window, so thank you for that. But
Yeah.
these ones are really, really elaborated, I would say. So this, for example, this is the, this is just the testing guide for chapter 6. That's testing the platform interaction. And yeah, look at how long this chapter is. So you really get a lot of different ideas and very detailed content about how to test something. But of course, this as a testing guide, this helps you. But as developers, we build stuff, so we will concentrate on the guidance for the standard, so the previous one. And for this talk, we will go chapter by chapter in this project. Now, there's, as mentioned, one more project from OWASP that worth mentioning, and that's the hacking playground. So if you really want to get your hands dirty, if you really want to go out and try some stuff, and well, this project is for you. So they have in GitHub 2 apps prepared. One is written in Kotlin, I think, and Java, and the other one is written in Swift. And those are just to hack them. So they provide you with the instructions. So if here you have this example, if you want to hack this, then do this and that, and then you actually learn what an attacker might be doing. So yeah, as mentioned, OWASP proposes different levels. So we have 3. We have L1, L2, and Air. L1 is the most basic, the standard one. So every app should comply to L1 if wants to be called secure, so to say. So things that we might find there are for example, HTTPS is used. Then L2 is actually about creating some defenses. So building, a wall against attackers, or multiple walls actually against attackers. And examples you might find there. So yeah, is I think one good example is if your app is taken to background, then the content, so the screenshot that is displayed when you look at the task switcher should be blurred, so that anyone can look at the content if the app is minimized. That's going to be L2. So in L1, it's just basic. L2 is you're actually expecting that something could go wrong, so you're being prepared for that. And then level Air is the most difficult one to get, of course. and that's actually playing the cat and mouse game. And things you would find there is, for example, detect if the app is running on an emulator, or detect if the app is being run on a jailbroken device or on a rooted device, things like that. So there you're actually attacking yourself to prevent other things from happening. So yeah, this guy, the MASVS, has 8 chapters. Chapter 1 to 7 are going to be about things for L1, L2. We can see that actually in action. So this is the guide. And if we go see the Git book, I just love this. Now let's just jump into chapter 2. And as you can see here, you have you have different rules. So things that you need to check if you want to comply to the standard, if you want to get certified. And then you have the 2 levels in this case. L1, you will see, is not for everything, but L2, certainly you need to comply to everything. And chapter 8 is just for level error. So now I would like to invite you to make a deep dive, and let's go through each chapter. Now this is going to be a lot of me talking, but if you have any question, please just jump in. I will try to bring some examples as I go through this, and also have some demos prepared with some things that I recommend. So, but please don't hesitate if you want to even open your mic. Just do it. Let's discuss. Let's figure this out together. So, chapter
Perfect.
number 1. Awesome. It talks about architecture. It talks about design and 3D modeling. So, chapter 1, generally speaking, is about aligning all the pieces. So, things that it will mention is, for example, when you're dealing with mobile security, you should also include your remote services. So mobile security is not only about your mobile phone. It also includes, the backend that the app is talking to. It will ask you to implement, for example, a mechanism for enforcing app updates, which means if your app got compromised and you need to deliver a new updated version, then your app is expected to prevent users to continue using the current version. Now, how would we do that in Xamarin? Well, I have an idea. Of course, this is just an idea. So what I actually did in the past is to, enable this mechanism by first using Xamarin Essentials version tracking. Sorry, this is just a Xamarin Forms app. It's very silly Xamarin Forms app. I have my net standard library. Oops, that's too much. Let's go back. There you go. So this is just a net standard library. I have my Android app, my iOS app, and my EWP app. This is Visual Studio for Mac, which I just love. That's weird. And this again is the app.sample class. And what I was showing is right there. So Xamarin Essentials has a plugin added. Yeah, it contains a plugin that's version tracking that will give you the version number that the user currently has installed, and you can figure other things out there, like, for example, is this the first time the app is running for this build, things like that. So, for example, first launch for current version. So what I would suggest in this case is to send a push notification from your backend to your app. It's better if it's a silent push notification. It should actually be a silent push notification, so that it tells the app that X version is now compromised or is just deprecated. You can reuse this for business rules, whatever. So then you store that information using Xamarin Essentials preferences, which is the version that is now deprecated. And then when your app launches, you just check for that. So if we have a deprecated version and that deprecated version is the current one, then open a page that will not allow users to do anything other than just go to the store, download the new version. Now, Yeah. So that's what I would recommend actually using. Yeah. So maybe something else you can do if you don't really have push notifications is just to query the backend whenever you do whenever the app starts. Maybe if it's the first run this day, then just go and query what's the version. Is there a deprecated version, something like that as well. Now let's move on.
Funny enough, I wrote a little blog article about that approach, not the notification approach, but the checking me against the API. So I might throw
Really?
my link in there too. Yeah.
Yes, please do. It's quite awesome. Version checking for Xamarin apps. Yes, very cool.
Use the API approach.
Yeah.
Not a silent push. I didn't even think of a silent push, so that's really cool.
Nice. Yeah. I will definitely check this out. Cool. Thanks. So next one. Well, this is pretty controversial because we all know that's wrong. You shouldn't hardcode any keys ever. But then, yeah, first is why, and the answer to that is because all of your source code, even if you obfuscate it, is going to be possibly read by an attacker. But yeah, so okay, Nico, it's okay that you shouldn't hardcode any keys, but how do you handle them? And my answer to that is serve them from the backend service. So first run ever for the app, you should query those keys, and then you get them in your mobile app and you store them safely using secure storage from Xamarin Essentials. We'll see that just in a second, but that's my recommendation. Just try to avoid hard coding keys as much as you can. There's always a way, I would say. And then, yeah, generally, I would say this chapter talks a lot about architecture. So it says, for example, that every component you define in your app should have a reason for existing, things like that. And it talks about compliance and standardization. It tells, for example, that your app should comply to all laws and that you should have a standard document, for example, where you define what everyone understands for information security. So that's just, to align all the pieces, just to know that when you talk about security, then you're referring to the same thing. So chapter 2 talks about that is data storage and privacy. First one, I would say even before that, general good practice for security, don't store anything. So in mobile applications, it's all about data. It's all about your users' data, actually. And also, but generally speaking, in security, we talk about the surface. So the surface that you expose so that attackers can cause damage to you. And you will always try and strive to have the lowest surface possible for attackers. So the less you store, the less there is, to steal. So generally speaking, you should always have good reasons on why you're storing information locally. If you do, because we all do, we all need to store secure information, say at least a token that you use to communicate to your backend. Well, for that, you should use definitely something like Xamarin Essentials, but in this case, not preferences, in this case, secure storage. And this is going to offer very, very easy API. So get async and remove and set async, sorry. Now, the nice thing about this, about secure storage, is it's going to use key store in the case of Android and keychain in the case of iOS. And that's the right storage for that kind of information because it's encrypted, it follows all the good practices and those kind of things. Next one, you should try to enforce a minimum level on the device access security policy. So that's of course an L2 kind of item. So what it says is basically that if you're going to, for example, allow users to do banking transactions, and operations in general, well, you should enforce users to have a local security mechanism. So, for example, that you can't just unlock the device without any passcode or PIN code or uh, biometric security. So at least there should be something there that yeah, you know, the users have enabled on the devices. Now, how do you ensure such a thing? Well, that's well, I had a very personal recommendation there, and that's, you know, use my library. So this thing here, BreachDetector, is a small library. It's very, very small, as you can see here. It's just these classes. So what they did here is to take some very good libraries existing in the Java Kotlin world and existing in the Swift or Objective-C world, and then bring them to Xamarin, and then combine them together, as many as I could, I would even say, and then expose a single API for us Xamarin developers. So then what we have here is the interface. So we have this method, get device local security type. This is going to return an enum, and that can be unknown if it can, yeah, if we can really detect what's there, what's being used in that device, or none, or pass, or biometric authentication. Now, if you look at the implementations, for example, Android actually relies on, I think it's Android X biometrics. So the implementation is really simple, but you don't need to learn this yourself. As far as, of course, we contribute to this together. This is entirely open source. You can look at this in GitHub. It's there for you. So just to get a very fast look at the different libraries that this is using. On iOS, we're just using one because it's very standardized library that exists in the Swift world. But in the case of Android, for example, we're using 3 different things. So we're combining them to get the most out of it. Yeah, so I would definitely suggest, for coming back to the slides, point number 2, there you go. Just, you know, use the BreachDetector library. Yeah, next point for this chapter 2 is high sensitive data when moved to background. So we discussed this for a bit. We say that if, for example, suppose that you're watching a video in YouTube, but previously you were actually checking your banking account. Now, what you can do there is to blur the screen as when the bank app goes background, so that if you pass your phone to a friend, then, well, they won't really know your banking information. So how do we do this? This is actually pretty easy. So we don't use the library for that. So let's go with the example first. So that's iOS, and here's Android. And if I take this app back to background like that, oops, come on. Yeah, there it goes. As you can see, it's being blurred. It's actually displaying a very nice color. Yeah, did you see this? It's not, is it strong enough, this color? Yeah, so it's a little bit green, just a little bit. Yeah, and then if we, of course, come back to the foreground, then yeah, the info is there again. And with Android, it's the same. It's not green. Sorry for that. I hope you're not really disappointed. Yeah, so the information is not there. Now, how did we do that? This is iOS. This is the app delegate class. And if you scroll down for a bit, you can see that we have 2 methods. So unactivated and on-resign activation. So every time the app goes to background, what we do is something very easy. So we just add a very dummy view on top of that window. And then whenever we come back from background, we just take it out. so remove from superview, and that's all. So it's very easy, very standard. Lots and lots of the apps follow this approach. And then in the case of Android, you might, yeah, there's only one single line. So you just need to say, well, this is, of course, my activity. And then in the onCreate method, I'm calling window set flags, and then we pass along the secure flags. Now you might think, okay, so that's interesting. Android seems busy. And I would say, no, it seems to be easy, but there's actually this very comprehensive link that I will paste in the chat window as well, that explains about all the limitations that this approach has. Now, bad news, there's no easy way to overcome those limitations. And what are they? Well, for example, there are many widgets on Android that provide their own window. So if we go back here, we're calling window.setFlags. And if you think of a dropdown, for example, on Android, that control is providing its own window, which means if you have a dropdown open in foreground and you take the app to background, then this is not going to have any effect. Yeah, so Android being Android, I would say. There's no easy way to solve that. It really, yeah, you need to do something very custom there if you want to overcome those limitations, but generally, this will work. Sorry, guys. We don't live in a perfect world.
Yeah, Android being Android.
Yeah. Yeah. So next one, it's about encrypting data. We're still talking about data storage, privacy. So if you need it, then use SQLite, use any database of your choice. But beware, that's not going to be encrypted. So, well, on iOS, the file system is encrypted by default, but it's actually pretty easy to breach that encryption and so Android doesn't do it. If you want to store your own data, use SQLite. If you're storing a lot of sensitive data, do use SQL Cipher. That's a third-party provider. They have a community license, works pretty good. Yeah, nothing that we can say about it. But there is an important point, it's more conceptual maybe. So I would highly recommend never, ever to rely on platforms. So if you really need to implement security like the right way, so to say, because you're maybe dealing with an app about health in the healthcare space, things like that, then never ever assume that the platform is going to do that for you. So for example, in the case of iOS, we know that the file system is encrypted, but that shouldn't stop you from using SQL Cipher, because in the end, with security, we're just adding layers on top of layers on top of layers on top of layers of security, because everything in the end can be compromised. There's absolutely no way you can get to 100% secure in software, ever. At least not that we know at this point. So the best you can do is to add layers on top of layers. And if you think about this in the most pessimistic way, then this means that all you can do is to make the attacker's life harder so that they give up and move on to the next app, right? Never rely on platforms, guys. Generally speaking, everything can be compromised, and you won't know until it's too late. So if you're using HTTPS, there are plenty of things that can go wrong with HTTPS. And if you want to add, if you're really sending a lot of sensitive information through that channel, just encrypt that. Again, use your own crypto layer, because many things can go wrong. So it's all about adding layers on top of some layers on top of layers. That's what this is all about. So one more thing to mention here is that you should always prioritize using internal memory for storage. This, of course, applies to Android mostly. Now, the thing is, the external storage doesn't really follow any of the security measures that Android has in place. So the file system is the concept of a sandbox doesn't really exist on the external storage, which means that any app, if you're let's say your app is stored in the external storage. Well, any other app can potentially read your data because the operating system is not going to apply any policy to that SD card, to that external storage. So if you're dealing with sensitive data, just mark that checkbox that says always installed in the internal storage on Android. Just do it. There's a reason for it being there. So chapter 3, good old crypto. Yeah, first one, don't ever rely on symmetric crypto as much as you can. Please just don't use it. And if you do, then don't hardcode your keys. And more than everything, don't place your algorithm next to your keys. This just having the keys, the cheese and the mouse next to each other. So just try not to do that. Never reuse the keys. And as we mentioned before, store the least possible. And last but not least, you need to think about this in a very paranoid way. So if you use all crypto, then that's the same as using no crypto. It takes nothing. That's just a piece of cake if you're using all the cryptography algorithms for an attacker to be able to access all your stuff and to do something with it. Now, PCR crypto is highlighted there, but not because it is all. So maybe I should have said in a different sentence, because PCR crypto is actually what you should be using. That's kind of the standard, I think, for most Xamarin apps. And even though the name contains PCL, it's still relevant, and it contains a lot of standard industry algorithms for crypto that you should use. Chapter number 4. So this is about authentication and session management. This is probably what we're used the most. So first recommendation, always invalidate sessions and always expire tokens. The expiry is there for a reason. And yeah, if this session ends, if the user logs out, then the server must acknowledge, otherwise you can have a breach there, and you're just giving the attacker a broader window, a time frame to do something with it. Always try to protect against multiple incorrect logins, failed logins attempts. That way you can easily, not be, compromised because of brute force attacks. So it's not too difficult. Actually, I think 4 or 5 times is enough, but you must do it. That's the point, maybe. And always display. So this is about adding a feature. Always display the current sessions to your users and allow them to block sessions if they really don't use that device anymore, for example. So if you use any social network like Instagram, Facebook, you can go, for example, your settings, you can see all the different accounts, all the different sessions that you have active at any moment. That's a very good practice. There's actually no reason to do that other than this is adding a feature. So yeah. And of course, in the case of mobile apps, we also we do mobile apps because we want to get the most out of that device capabilities. And that usually means we're going to have offline features, which means we will store information so that users can log in offline. So be sure not to store anything, any sensitive information in something like preferences. Use secure storage. And if you can, then store the hashed password and not the password, for example. You should actually prioritize saving the token and not the user and password. But if you must store the password, then try to store the hash and try to do it in the secure storage. So we're, I think, this is chapter 4, and we have 8. So there are 4 more to go, guys. I'm not sure how are we doing. Do we have any questions? I see, Dylan, that you post some links in the chat window. How
Yeah,
is everyone doing?
hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. So I just don't want to make sure, yeah, that I want to make sure I'm not just talking too much. Is there any question? Just please jump in.
So I was a little unclear of your breach detector, what the features were in that library.
Nico. I'm reserving that for the end.
Okay.
Because that's
okay.
chapter 8.
Okay, I'm getting ahead
That's
of
a very
you.
good question. You know, the topic, that library is amazing.
Awesome. Looking forward to that.
All right, so we'll just move on.
Oh. Sergio, I see you've unmuted. Do you have a question? Oh.
No, thank you. I'm fine. You can go ahead.
Great.
Cool. All right, so chapter 5 is actually the communication and network. So HTTP ends with S, so it is pronounced HTTPS, and you should use it. There should be no reason, especially in the mobile world. So your users will connect from Starbucks. Your users will connect from, well, probably not now, right? But they will use those networks at the airports, and everything you think is, you know, not secure and that we know is not safe, then we might even do that ourselves as well, if I'm honest. So yeah, use HTTPS. Be very careful on the exceptions you add to Apple ATS and with Android clear texts. So those are features from both operating system to enable or disable insecure communication, basically. So you can set exceptions there, you can set different types of configurations. So if you use HTTP in your staging or in your test or development environment, just make sure not to deliver that with your release version, because it can get really, really dangerous. So it is, yeah, just double check that before deploying the app to the store. And then try to do certificate pinning, because one thing is to use a secure channel, that's HTTPS, but the different thing is to be sure you're talking to the right backend, to the right server. So for those who are not really aware about certificate pinning, that's basically hard coding in your app, either the certificate or the public key to that certificate, that's for TLS. And then whenever there is communication between your app and the server, then you can check if that server is the right one. Now, bad news is we cannot really do certificate pinning in Xamarin easily when using the NSURL session and the Android HTTP client handler. So those are, you know, the native implementations that we can use for HTTP client. So there's a lot of hassle with that. I think nowadays, so there are 2 famous issues, one for iOS, one for Android, and things got messy, I would even say. So if you're coming from the .NET world, then what you would typically do for a simple HTTP client is something like this. So service point manager does certificate, server certificate by validation callback, and then this is an event handler, and then you have implementation for that. And in that implementation, you would check if the key that you have hard-coded in your code is equal to the one that is being communicated to. But this only works if you're not using the native implementations in your Xamarin app. Now, this means I went to the project properties of my Android app, then Android build, and here we can choose what do we want to use for the HTTP implementation. Now, the managed one, so the one that comes from the .NET world, should not be used because it doesn't support TLS 1.2, which means it's insecure. And then the Android one doesn't really enable us to do the SSL pinning in a very easy way. So, and yeah, my recommendation is to use modern HTTP client, but not the old one. Actually, the new one. So it came back to life, I would say. So as you can see, it became pretty famous again. It has over 600,000 downloads. Not there, but yeah, no, not that much, but almost 500,000 downloads. And it provides you with a really, really easy way to do certificate pinning. As you can see, you can add the public keys here, a little bit more configuration, good to go. All right, cool, Jeremy.
I didn't realize that was back either. That's great.
It is, guys. So, of course, this means that if you use such something it is, then you won't really be using the Android or the iOS one. So maybe just for now, until they really figure this out on how to do it right, then I think it's a great option. And yeah, maybe one little piece of advice as well. So if you create, because maybe, you're not aware of that, we have these checkboxes here to set what do we want to use for our implementation of HTTP client. But this dropdown will only be used if you instantiate the HTTP client without any parameters. If you set any parameter while initializing, so when constructing the object, the HTTP client, then this will be absolutely ignored. So just be aware of that in case, general knowledge. I didn't know that, and yeah, I was quite surprised when I realized it makes sense, but I didn't know. So perhaps you don't as well. So this is nice. I didn't realize. Yes, that's Spain we're discussing. Jeremy, cool. So yeah, generally always use latest and greatest standards. That's what OWASP is going to recommend this, which makes sense, of course, because in the end, if they have a new standard, there's a reason for that, and we should actually comply. Chapter number 6 talks about the platform interaction. So how does your app behave in the local ecosystem, which is iOS or Android, of course. So first point, always challenge, how do you communicate with external apps? Just be aware that using implicit intents, for example, on Android is super insecure. Just to draw an example, say you have a banking app, and then you have, of course, every month you want to deliver the summaries, the account summaries of users as PDF files, but then you don't want to build the PDF viewer yourself, because in most cases users will have something for that. So what you just do as a developer is throw an implicit intent, which means if you open this file, then I will just bring in all the different options for you to use to open this file. Now, what could happen, because that means you're interacting with an external app that you don't know anything about, then the user could have installed an app that reads PDF files, say Adobe Reader, but not the actual original one, but maybe a tampered version. Now, tampering is a technique that you can use to repack an existing app, so to unpack it, change some code, repack it again and distribute it with that malware added to that, or with those additions, basically. So maybe if the user has a tampered app installed that maybe got recommended by a friend or whatever that didn't got installed through the store, then you might be opening that file and you might be communicating with a tampered app. So then just by that, now the attacker got access to all the banking information, all the account, all the balances, all the banking information basically from your user. So really challenge how do you communicate with other apps. General recommendation, try to avoid this as much as you can. And also because if you, for example, offer some interaction to an app that you're partnered with, say your organization is partnered with a different app, then you are as secure as your partner. So if they have some breaches, and if the app got compromised, and if you offer a token for them, then bad news, the attacker got a token to your app as well, to your backend. So always challenge, how do you communicate with other apps installed in the user device? And about web views, well, general recommendation, try not to use them. They always bring not just bad UX, but generally security breaches as well. So seriously, don't use them. And we know for sure that there are some cases where we cannot really change maybe the person with the idea is mine, and we just need to do it. So in that case, of course, it's in the end, it's okay to use web views. You really should challenge, why did you use them? But if there's no other choice, then my recommendation, okay, but use HTTPS and try not to use JS. I would say, of course, you will need to have that enabled, but try to not have interfaces between your C# code and your JavaScript code. You can do that. It doesn't mean you should do that. That's very insecure. There are plenty of different things that can happen in the middle, and that makes it insecure. And try to always clean up resources at the end. So this is all about how much do you expose to the attacker. And if you use that web view just in a single screen, okay, that's fine. Use it there, but whenever the user moves away from that screen, just clean up everything, clean up all resources. That way, at least you can, improve that and make sure that those objects doesn't live too long. Yeah, so I'm just reading the chat. Yeah, Sarah, I see that you need to use that. I know. Yeah, being there, I think. I think it's Shopify that I use, and I needed to display that in a web view. It's too bad. It's too bad, really. Yeah, sometimes we don't have a choice. But of course, using web views doesn't mean your app is going to be breached. It doesn't mean it's going to be insecure. It's all about layers, if we come back to that. And for example, if your app is really difficult to tamper, then it's very unlikely that your web is going to be insecure. So it really depends.
Yeah, I had made a comment too. I had asked Sarah if she was dealing with the payment gateway, because I've dealt with some payment gateways before that the only way you could interact with them was through a web view. That was the only way to complete a transaction.
Yeah, still out for us small devs.
Yeah.
All right, so we're almost there. Now, chapter 7. Chapter 7 is about code quality, build settings, those kind of things. Of course, this doesn't apply to us because we always make the best possible code and we're great developers. But just in case, remove logs. There are many cases, many examples in the industry of apps that got hacked because of the logs. And maybe you're just exposing users and passwords because of your debugging sessions and you forgot to remove that. Or in the case of a very famous app, I think it was Badu, it's I think a social network. They got hacked because they were exposing every request response to the output, to the Android logs. So it can get really dangerous. If debug is there to help you, that's going to make sure your code is not compiled, it's not going to be embedded into the final executable. Easy, but not too much in the end. Try not to crash, really, but not because it's bad practice, also because it can really expose security breaches. So, for example, if you go to the crash dumps on any platform, there are plenty of information that you can read there. And if an attacker acknowledges that your app crashes, then most likely they will try to make a lot of things before the app crashes so that more information is dumped, and it can get really, really tricky. Of course, these are people that really know what they're doing. So if you're crashing, then you're just exposing them. You're just giving them some advantages. Now, be aware, we can AOT our apps in Xamarin. That's going to be by default in iOS, and we can opt in for that on Android. Just be aware that even though AOT will take your DLLs and convert them to actually bytecode written for the actual machine that's going to run that app, AOT is going to do that, but still include your DLLs. So if you have an APK written of an app that was written in Xamarin, it takes nothing to get the source code out of that. You just unpack the APK, and then you got the DLLs there. And then you can use any tool to convert that DLL to source code. So that's not really a good idea. Well, you can avoid that. Sorry, the point is that you can avoid that with AOT. But you can use that other checkbox that I think it's an enterprise feature. It's called bundle assemblies into native code. Now, what that's going to do is to take all of your DLLs and yeah, I think it's going to compress them using gzip into a single .so file. So that then in runtime, yeah, what's going to happen is that's going to be unzipped, read and unzipped, and there in runtime DLLs are going to be there again. That's sort of an obfuscation. It's a little bit of an obfuscation that you can do to your code, but the value is not that. The value of doing that, such a thing, is actually that you're making tampering much, much harder to the attacker. So the attacker will need to modify a lot of more things, yeah, many more things there to actually be able to ship your source code edited. So let's look at this. So I'm back on that app that I was showing before. If I go to Android build, then I think it is enterprise. I'm really not sure, but you can say embed assemblies in native code. And this is the option I've been discussing, right? Use it. That's general recommendation. And of course, we have one more flag that we need to set, and that's debuggable false. So if we go back to the app, let's go to the Android project main activity. And as you can see here, I have this very, very little if purposes for compile variable there. If debug, then I have an assembly attribute, which is saying debuggable true in the case of when debugging, always false. Now that's there because it's, yeah, this is an Android specific thing, by the way. And debuggable false is going to prevent your app from allowing a debugger to attach to it. Now, if you don't have that, it's really, really, really easy to attach a debugger to your app. And then if you do so, then of course there are many things you cannot do because it's a release version, but you can still, for example, check the memory dumps, and then you can, if you have, for example, the password in memory because you're manipulating that string, then that debugger can really see that. or if you have any key in memory, then with a memory dump and a debugger attached, you can see those kind of things. So very easy, takes nothing to add it, debuggable false. And now we made it to chapter 8. Chapter 8, as we said at the very beginning, is only for the highest level and that you can get to with OWASP. So it's about building defenses that are proactively going to check for breaches. So if you want to comply to this level, then your app should detect conditions like jailbreak, routing, debugging, emulation, things like that. It's very insecure that your app runs on a jailbroken device or on a rooted device, because you can have a lot of tools running next to your app that can be extracting information. So generally speaking, you shouldn't do that. There should be no reason for any user to use your app on an emulator, other than just running all those tools that are there to perform attacks. So generally, you should not allow that. You should check for reverse engineering. That's, this one is very hard from a Xamarin perspective, because most of the tooling that it is built by specialists is made for Kotlin or for Swift. To my eyes, there's nothing I have encountered that deals with reverse engineering detection. That's, for example, there are many tools that will reverse engineer your code, but also do it while the app is running. So that's what we're discussing here, that your app should detect while running if there's a reverse engineering tool next to it. We don't have that for Xamarin. And then your app should be able to detect code additions. That's called, again, tampering. Now, there's a very easy way, that I would say a smart way, that of course is not unbreakable, but it is something. So if you're tampering the app, and then you're trying to, that app, when it is installed, is not going to be installed from a very well-known app store, say the Google App Store, the Amazon App Store, the Apple App Store. So generally for tampered app, that's not the source. So what you can do there is to detect what is the source of, how did this app got installed. So just let's look at the BreachDetector library, and we have that. So here it is again. You can check, we have a check that's for detecting whether the app got installed from the store. So if the app, in this case, if the app, I wasn't installed from the App Store, then I will just close myself. That's the idea. That way you can prevent tampering. There are some other ways, like checking some sums that you can create based on your source code. Generally speaking, this is at least something, And just maybe to also answer your question, Dylan, some other things you can do with BreachDetector is to check if the app is running on a jailbroken device, on a rooted device, check if the app is running on an emulator, if it has a debugger attached, for example. So yeah, and that's pretty much all we have for now. I started this only a few weeks ago, no, probably 2 months ago, something like that. So I'm actively thinking what else can I add, but for now I think, this is something, of course. Now,
Very nice.
Sorry.
I just said that's very nice. Looks like a great
cool.
tool.
Very nice, cool. So yeah, also very important to consider all these checks that we have. I didn't write them, so it's not that I don't take any credits for that. I just took some packages from very nice people, very well-educated people in the mothers, and I just made it available for Xamarin, I would say. But everything is still breakable. So doing these checks doesn't mean, of course, that your app is 100% safe. as we said, that's not going to happen. That's not how mobile security works. So best you can do is to use as many tools as you can for these kind of things, and then expect for the best, I would say. But if this in the end gets, if you lose the battle, so to say, that can always happen. And these libraries, so generally in security, everything goes open source, because we believe, I think, we're better together building these kind of things, and it's a community effort in the end. But that doesn't mean this is 100% secure. So we're doing the best we can, so to say, but it's definitely the cat and mouse game. And then one last recommendation: try to obfuscate your code. There's a very well known tool called .obfuscator. It's installed by default actually in Visual Studio. It has a community license, and you can pay for it, of course. It works pretty well. If you want to obfuscate your code, go ahead, do it. As always, that doesn't mean your app is going to be unbreakable or anything like that. It just means the attacker will need some extra time to figure out what's going on there. But maybe that's going to be enough so that the attacker moves to the next app and gives up, you know. So I think that's all I got in terms of content. So my conclusion, I think it's that, yeah, at least what I did and what I recommend is to follow OWASP. That you don't really need to be an expert in security to get it right. There's, as you can see, there are many things we can do and that we can discuss without being, security experts or the security IT area in our organizations. And most important than everything, we owe this to our users. The user apps, they don't have a clue what's going on there, and they just expect that apps will do what they should do and that we're in control of things. So we really owe this to our users. So that's all from my side. Thanks a lot. I do have one more slide, but first, thank you. Thanks a lot for having me, for listening to me. I hope it wasn't too hard or too long, and happy to receive any questions if there are any.
Any questions out there? Feel free to unmute your mic if you want to chime in.
Hey, Nico. Hey, Dylan.
Hey, Oscar.
Hey, how's it going? Really nice talk. I was going through your talk and looking at my code. So basically, I have so many issues. Could you please go deeper? Like the one that scared me the most is, can you go deeper on HTTP client with the handler parameter? Like you mentioned something about that not using the native implementation.
Yes, of course. Yes. So what we would typically have in our apps is something like this. There's HTTP client. Of course, you should have a single instance in your app equals to a new HTTP client, right? So that's what you typically have. Now, if you instantiate your HTTP client like that, then whatever you select here in this checkbox, in this dropdown, is going to work. But say you use your own, because you can pass along some parameters here. So say you use your own HTTP client HTTP message handler. So let's just declare something very quick. So if you use it then here, because you have any reason to do so, like for example, override send async, there it goes. And then here, before sending the request, you add some custom stuff. And then you really need this to be in your HTTP pipeline. So because you need this, then you instantiate your HTTP client like this, right? So you add this parameter. If you do so, then whatever you pick in your dropdown, in that dropdown, in the project properties is not going to be taken into account, not at all.
So that means it's going to use the managed one.
Yes.
Oops. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, funny. I didn't think that was still a problem either.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Good to know.
All right. So before, if there's any question, we can, of course, I think we have time for that. But before, because I think some people are leaving, maybe it's too late. But I have one more thing, one extra thing from Xablu, the company we work for. So some we have prepared for you because we really like the Xamarin community and we're actually pretty fanatic about Xamarin. So we do have it, this service about support for your apps. So if your team is ever stuck, if you're not really reaching those 5 stars in your rating, if your users are not using the features that you build, for example, things like that, if you need an expert code review, things like that as well, or if you have problems with your nuggets and things like that, we're there for you. We can help you there. And for this session, we actually have something special for you. So this is a 1 hour free support for your apps. So anything that you need, or if you just want to check in and, hey, how are you guys? And that's all, then we're very happy with that. I will share this link for this offering now. This is free of charge, as mentioned, nothing to pay there. This is just how it works. I just wanted to make sure I share that first because it's free, but also just because I saw some people left. So there it is.
Awesome. So I had a quick question, Nico.
Yes, please.
When you're implementing this, where do you usually start? So say you've got an app that's already built. Where would you be your starting point for, I guess, would you kind of assess and then go from there, or do you have a standard way of going through this and implementing most of these measures?
Right. That's actually a very good question. What I would do, what I did in the past, at least, and well, it worked pretty well. First, you need to decide to what level do you need to comply, and then go one level at a time. Because of course, there are too many things to consider, too many things to be aware of and to check. So first, I would recommend to go with L1. That's unless you have very good reason to go for any of the other levels, in which case you might also need to comply to some other regulations maybe. So first go to L1 and then just make a list. So I think OWASP even offers an Excel template that you can download and use yourself, and just to add some more details and keep track of all the different points that you need to implement, and then go one by one.
That's great advice.
What about in terms of testing that your app is very secure? Any testing strategies moving forward?
Well, being honest, when I had to do this, then I also had a team of specialists that were there for me testing all the stuff that I made wrong, I would say. But generally, I think if you need to test this yourself, there are different ways in different contexts actually, because for many things you don't really need to make something special to test it. Like for example, using HTTPS, well, it just goes. And if you do need to test things, like for example, if the app detects jailbroken devices and things like that, then I would highly recommend, and if you do need to do that yourself, of course, then I would recommend following the testing guide plus the hack playground. There are a lot of things that you can learn there. I used it myself, and it can get complicated, I'm not gonna lie, but there is also a Slack channel for the OWASP community I should have mentioned that during the slides probably, but the community is super active there in that Slack channel. So if you find issues, if you find yourself stuck while testing that playground, then there are plenty of people there that will for sure help you. I was really surprised on how active that Slack channel is, so highly recommendable. And I would do that. I would, yeah. Oh, thanks Dylan for the link. That's quite awesome. So yeah, that's my recommendation.
That's
Awesome, thank
good to
you.
know. Oscar, you've got your hand up. Do you have another question?
Yes. So for the non-initiated, so Dylan already asked a question about where, like, how do you start? My question is more like, is there any sort of tooling that you can put as part of your build pipeline that is going to do some sort of static code analysis and speed up some magic and say, hey, these 5 points you used to comply with them, now you broke them? Because usually you have new people coming on a team or people coming in, jumping in, helping, and then leaving for 6 months.
Oscar, you stole my question. Good question.
Okay.
That's actually a great one. There's nothing that I know that's open source that you can just plug in and check every pull request, for example. There are for sure plenty of companies that do that. I know at least 2 companies that actually serve as the security department and serves the mobile team in terms of assessments. So it is not supposed to work like that, I would say, but generally in the real world, there's the QA team and there's the security team, and I think the way it works best is to have the devs hand over to QA and then QA hand over to security. That's generally how it works in most cases, and for that you will need to hire, of course, specialists that do that for you. And yeah, for that they might have some sort of tooling that's automated and can be plugged into your repository maybe, but nothing that I can recommend like an open source tool or something like that. But there are certainly a lot of companies that do it.
Good to know. Have you done, so you've done research into that, Nico, trying to find some tools to actually analyze your code or analyze your app package to see if it has any known vulnerabilities?
Well, I think GitHub is investing quite a lot there. We have Dependabot, for example, and I think they also have some bots for security.
Yeah.
So I think this is going to expand. I use SonarQube, but actually I do know what Jeremy is saying, that there is probably an extension for it.
Right.
So I would definitely recommend checking that out. I will do it myself.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if there's any tooling out there too, just doing some quick Googling. Nothing obvious though, so yeah.
Right.
Interesting, yeah. Fortify. Oh, right, that's HP's product, right? Sergio says Fortify, or
Those are good.
former HP.
I think it's Micro Focus now, but it used to be part of the Web Inspect tools tool set from HP.
Mm-hmm. It's cool.
That's good, because yeah, I'm interested in having that built into my DevOps pipeline if I can find a reasonable tool with reasonable pricing model to
Right.
have something like that automatically built in. I think that would be very appealing. Cool, great. That's probably a whole other topic, the whole DevSecOps topic.
Yeah, I think so. So
This is great, Nico. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. It was a great presentation. I learned a lot.
thank you. Actually, very happy to be here. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime you want to come back, let us know and we'll be happy to have you.
Cool. Thanks.
And thanks to everybody for joining too. Any other questions, comments, or anything? I think I'm going to end the recording now and